Welcome back to Draft House, everyone. I am Joe. Today we'll be looking at the 2027 NFL Draft big board for the preseason. College football season is about to start next week with week 0. So wanted to get this in beforehand. Now, I've watched a lot of tape this summer, but there's still a lot of football left to be played. So this should be used more as like a watch list for the season. This will fluctuate, I'm sure, a ton before the 2027 NFL Draft. But this is some of the stuff I saw this preseason. Let's get it started off here. Look at the top guy here, Jeremiah Smith, wide receiver one. I think he's the best player in the class. Now, some people will move up the quarterbacks because of positional value. I get that, but a lot of times that creates a lot of errors in their decision making on how they rank prospects. And I still think there's a lot for those quarterbacks to prove. I do think there's a lot of quarterbacks. I think some of them are going to be, a lot of them are going to be in the top 50, but Jeremiah Smith, for his position, is the best player in this class. Just big body, can run after the catch. He's really, really good player, and I think wide receiver one and player one in this class for the time being. Number two, Leonard Moore, the cornerback out of Notre Dame, just shut down, lockdown corner. This is a guy that matched up with Jeremiah Smith as a freshman. Last year, he was shutting down a lot of guys. Notre Dame's defense is going to be nasty this year, and he's a big reason why. Now, if you do want to hear more specifically about the players on this list, make sure to go watch the summer watch list for some of these guys. There's, each position is broken down. You can see more specifics about why I like Jeremiah Smith, Leonard Moore, all these guys going down. So go check those out too as we go along if you want some more details. This will be more of a broad overview of the big board. Colin Simmons comes in as edge number one at player number three. Does a little bit of everything for Texas's defense. He can get after the passer. He's so quick and so athletic. I think that he has a little bit of a edge over Dylan Stewart, who's number 4 on this board. Dylan Stewart might have a little bit better of a body for the next level. We need to see him take that next step this season, have more production this season for South Carolina's defense, for that team to take a step forward and for his draft stock. He very well can move up the board a couple spots, but still very, very highly thought of as a draft prospect already. All right, number 5, Arch Manning, quarterback out of Texas. Now, a lot of people who didn't watch the whole season, didn't see him, after week 5 or 6, maybe saying, hey, this is not it. I think he was injured. His mechanics were way off. If he fixes his mechanics, he played well down the stretch. I think this is a guy that could end up being the first overall pick, could end up being the top player in the class if he really lives up to it, right up there with Jeremiah Smith. It'd be very hard to knock Jeremiah Smith off that perch, but I think he could definitely be somewhere in that conversation. A guy that has athleticism, a guy that can, protect the football at times. I think if he fixes those mechanical issues, I think it's going to be a lot better season, especially with the talent around him at Texas. Dante Moore, the quarterback of Oregon, would have been quarterback 2 in last year's class behind Fernando Mendoza. Some people would have had him 1, but I think 2. Quick release, a guy who's very accurate. He's gotten criticism for not playing well in big games, but that is a step he could take this year. And I think that's something that he's going to have a lot of experience at Oregon doing. If he doesn't do that, if he doesn't play well in big games this year, then you can move him down the board. But the guy who has like one more thing to put together, I'm going to bet on that being a guy who probably is a highly drafted quarterback. But if it doesn't work out, then again, move him down the board then. Cam Coleman comes in at number 7, the wide receiver out of Texas. A guy that kind of reminds me of George Pickens, the ways he plays, but probably more upside. Didn't have the best quarterback play at Auburn. He goes to Texas. He is a big body wide receiver, made an incredible catch that's making its way from Texas practice about what he can do, making adjustments in the air and everything to catch the ball. I think he can really break out this year in a huge way with Arch Manning at quarterback. Staying at Texas at number 8, Trevor Gooseby, the offensive tackle. He and Jordan Seaton are 8 and 9 here. I think that they're very, very comparable. I think Gooseby has a little bit of an edge right now, but Seaton, I think, a little bit of a body transformation this offseason. Let's see how that comes into play. Let's see how he does at LSU in this Lane Kiffin offense. I think that's going to be a debate we have maybe till the very end point of the 2027 NFL draft cycle. CJ Carr, number 10, comes in here. Can make plays out of structure. I thought he did a really good job in his first year as a starter. Loses his first 2 games, goes on, rips off 10 straight wins. Good accuracy. Sometimes he can have too much faith in his arm talent. He does have solid arm talent, but he tries to fit the ball into tight windows, and that gets him into trouble. But I think just another year of maturity, and he could be a guy who could even be quarterback 2 in this class, maybe quarterback 1 if Arch doesn't pan out. But it'll be hard to get to that point as well. But I think he's just showed a lot in his first season as a starter. One of these guys that could go back for another year after this if he feels like he could be the number 1 quarterback in next year's class. That's definitely a possibility as well with the NIL money floating around, and that's something we'll talk about with some of the other quarterbacks in this class later on. David Stone, defensive lineman in Oklahoma, could really just wreak havoc up front. Now Oklahoma's going to have him and Jaden Jackson as the defensive tackles. Defense will be really good. Just watch how he can just get into those gaps and what he can do with that. That is why I like him a lot. KJ Bolden, I think, is the best safety in the class, at player number 12 overall. A guy that has been around for a while, played a lot of meaningful snap on Georgia's defense. I think that he's going to make a lot of plays in the back end for them. Will Eccles, the defensive lineman for Ole Miss, a guy that a lot of people are kind of rising up the draft boards already. We already have risers on the draft boards. They're saying he's defensive lineman number one. I think he's number two, but he's right there with everyone. He's a very good player. I think he's going to stand out a little bit too. Ellis Robinson and Xavier Brown, 14 and 15, guys that I think have made big plays in the SEC. I think both those guys could be the second and third corner off the board in the 2027 NFL draft. Amari Washington could have gone pro last year, decided to come back to Oregon. Definitely some things I think to clean up on his game. I think gap integrity will be one thing that I think you see sometimes, and other people have kind of come out and said they don't see it at other times. So I'm excited to see him on a more consistent level this year. 17, Trey Green. He is tight end one for me. He is a matchup nightmare. A guy that I think could have a huge season in Lane Kiffin's system. I want to see more blocking out of him, but definitely tough to match up with him. Bronte Johnson, the safety out of Notre Dame, good size, good range for him. Have him at 18. Could end up being safety number one in this class. Ahmad Moten, the defensive lineman out of Miami, a guy who made big plays down the stretch for Miami last year. I'm going to give that nod to him and put him in the top 20 for how he played down the stretch. And there's some other guys on this list that we'll talk about that could be right next to him, or other defensive linemen he could end up jumping that we can talk about later. Kelly Jones, the corner for Mississippi State, big bodied guy. I want to see how he does this year, but he's has a lot of good tape at Mississippi State. But that big body, I think, is going to help him be, a good draft prospect when it's all said and done. He also moves well for the size. Now, number 21, Darian Mensah for Miami. Transfers in from Duke. Guy I've been kind of back and forth on. I don't think he's quite at the elite top tier of this class. I have him and Julian Sain around the same range. A guy that I think came in at Tulane his first year, played very well, accurate quarterback. He does have to kind of like wind up to throw deep more than most quarterbacks. I think that's something to watch out for. Can he have more natural arm talent? Can he work on that arm strength to make it better as he goes along? But did really good things at Tulane, really good things at Duke, and now he goes to Miami with just wide receiver talent, running back talent out the wazoo, and offensive line talent too, even if they do have to develop it a little bit. Tayo Uiagalelei comes in at edge number 3 and 22 overall. He's a guy that rushes the passer pretty well. I thought he was pretty good as a run defender too. Now, other Oregon pass rushers have gotten a lot of hype because of the sack number. I thought he still played very well despite the sack number going down last year. I do want to see him bounce back this year and get back to a higher sack total, but I got that I think has plenty of talent. Justin Scott, the other Miami guy that I mentioned, could end up being higher than Moten. He probably has higher upside, has some more athleticism, but just maybe not the stats that Moten has so far this season. I'm gonna trust Moten for right now. DL4, Scott's right there. This is a very talented defensive line class. 24, Ryan Coleman Williams, wide receiver 3 out of Alabama. Now, I think a lot of times we can sit here and say, hey, last year did not go well for him. And it didn't. He had plenty of drops, seemed like he was going to go across the middle, focus drops, all that stuff. He is a guy that I'm going to trust what he did as a freshman. I'm going to trust that he's going to get better this season with some of those issues. If it doesn't happen, move him down the board. This is still preseason. This is more of the watch list. I think there is a case that he can get back to his freshman form. So I'm going to keep him relatively high. If this was after his freshman season, he'd probably be even higher than this. Probably top 15, top 10 prospect. But doesn't have the size. There's not as much room for error for him. So he really needs to improve this next season at Alabama. Jamari Johnson, the tight end of Oregon. Other people have him higher. He had 500 receiving yards last season. That's with Kenyon Sadiq around. I think he could be more of an inline tight end than Sadiq, given his size, but we have to see him develop that blocking as well. Julian Sain, quarterback number 5 out of Ohio State, player number 26. Player number 26, quarterback 5. He is a guy that I think he could be very good. He was the Heisman finalist, very accurate. But you just kind of sit there and say, how far up the board can a guy who doesn't have the height or the arm strength can really get? So there are plenty of guys in the history of the NFL that are shorter and don't have the strongest arm. Everyone will point to Drew Brees and stuff like that. But this is a guy that I do prefer guys who are accurate, who make smart football decisions. So if he plays well this year and can win some big games, I think there's plenty of room for him to move up the board. In the same way Darian Mensah can. They're different quarterbacks, but in the same way that those two guys can both have some elevation on this board. But just it's harder for guys who don't have that physical talent that other guys have. Nick Marsh, the wide receiver for Indiana, comes in at player number 27. He and Charlie Becker both are really good players. Now, Nick Marsh, again, Michigan State didn't have the best quarterback play, didn't have the most consistent offense. Now he goes to more of an established quarterback, and Josh Hoover comes in. I think he can have a big year. I think he's a guy that, people might like Charlie Becker right now on a consensus level, but Marsh might be the guy who ends up being um, better than him overall. Carter Smith, the offensive tackle for Indiana, might have to move into guard, and that is a determination we'll make maybe after this season's tape comes in. A guy that very, very good, doesn't allow much pressure. I think that you could try to say let's try him at tackle and then move him inside the guard at the next level, but that is something to watch. Quincy Rhodes, number 29, the edge out of Arkansas, bigger edge rusher, has a lot more consistency rushing from the inside. That is something that I think will come into play here. Maybe people judge him as a defensive lineman. Again, for now, we'll keep him as an edge for now. After the season's tape comes in, after we get more clarity about how the draft class looks, we may change him to defensive lineman. We'll just see how that goes. Sammy Brown, the linebacker out of Clemson, is the top one on my board so far. A guy that I think can be a very good run stopping linebacker. Also has a little bit of potential, I think, in coverage as well. A guy who came in with a lot of hype and has played a lot of football for Clemson, but that team needs to get better as well. Jaden Ball, running back number one out of Florida. Now, if you're looking for like the most productive college running backs, it's not going to be him. Florida has not had the team around him. There are different things that make college football players stars than NFL draft guys. But with how big he is and how he moves, I think he's in play to be the first running back taken, even if he isn't the most productive college running back. So that's something to watch out for this year. Can the running game get better for Florida? Can the offensive line get better for Florida as well? Number 32, Lenore Sellers, quarterback six, South Carolina. A guy that, you know, he has all the tools. I do think he took a step forward as a quarterback last year. I'm still waiting to see more out of him. He didn't have much of a supporting cast. I think it's fair to say an NFL team will like the tools and will draft him early no matter what. That's just how they do these things. I'm just not quite sold, and I'm lower on the consensus on him, even if he did take steps as a quarterback last year. And we'll see what he does this year. Maybe he can rise up my board and be a lot higher, but it's a tough evaluation right now because even if he did take that step, it's just so many people I think are overvaluing the raw tools that he has. Kate Piper, the interior offensive lineman from Iowa, top interior offensive lineman on the board. Kingston Viliamo Asa, linebacker number two out of Notre Dame. A guy that I want to see him play more. He's been impact plays, but I want to see him play more to kind of build up that stock. He could very well be linebacker one in this class. Charlie Becker, the wide receiver out of Indiana. Trying to play like Alec Pierce, the guy who gets downfield. Want to see him develop that route tree a little bit more, kind of like Alec Pierce did this past season in the NFL year. But as a prospect, very similar to Alec Pierce, just obviously has more hype than Alec Pierce did coming out. Omarion Miller, the wide receiver out of Arizona State, very twitchy. I think he's a guy that could have a big season at Arizona State, although they are a team that will have a new quarterback, probably Cutter Boley, the Kentucky transfer. But let's see how they do. The talent won't be as good as it was a couple of years ago for Arizona State when they made the playoff. Kewan Lacey, the running back out of Ole Miss, very productive running back. A guy that this year is going to benefit from having traded Ed Chambliss for the full season, maybe having some Heisman hype, a guy that I think has some pretty good vision on display. Austin Searveld, the interior offensive lineman for Ohio State. Now, he played tackle last year. Ohio State's still trying to figure out how they're going to put their offensive line together. I think the length's going to move him inside to the next level. So, with Ohio State already considering him at guard, and they've already had some practices with him at guard and at tackle, I'm going to put him in interior offensive line for now. I think the length will hold him back, but he's a very good potential interior offensive lineman who can have success. Very technically sound player. Ashton Hampton, the corner out of Clemson. Caden Green, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. Drew Mestemaker, the quarterback out of Oklahoma State, comes in at quarterback 7 and player number 41 on the board. A guy who just needs more experience. Really good stuff at North Texas. We talk all the time about quarterbacks needing more experience. I think he has all the tools. I think he needs to fix his motion a little bit to be a better quarterback prospect. But let's see how he does in the Big 12. Let's see if he's a guy that, like CJ Carr or like some of these other guys, might want to come back for another year and keep on developing their game. So I don't want to get too far ahead of things. He's about 10 spots higher on the consensus board. I'll keep him at 41. A guy that's still worthy of moving up the board if he plays well this year, but let's see how he does. Mario Craver, the wide receiver out of Texas A&M, small but very, very shifty, and I'm excited to see what he can do now that he is the top guy for Texas A&M, even though they do have a talented receiver room. With Casey Concepcion in the next level, maybe he's the guy who steps up and makes some more big plays this year, a guy that can really separate. Coy Parrish, the safety out of Oregon, I'm higher on him than consensus. A guy that even played both ways at Minnesota comes in. Dylan Thieneman role. At least Dylan Thieneman, probably going to use him in a different way. Dylan Thieneman, they tried to use him as a Caleb Downs type player at Oregon, but Coy Parrish, maybe a little bit different, but I think he's a guy that can really shore up the back of that Oregon defense. Good ball skills, obviously playing both ways. I'm excited to see what he can do. Jadarius Peak did get injured this offseason for South Carolina. We'll see how he comes back this season and plays, but had some good athleticism for his size and transfer from NC State to South Carolina. Trevor Locke, good tape at Iowa. Again, these are second round players right now on the big board in terms of the ranking, but we'll see how they do. Maybe they can improve. Kenyatta Jackson comes in for Ohio State at edge number 5. Looking for him to take a step forward on this defense. He's been in college for a long time. Yanze Pierre, Alabama's edge rusher, will help the edge rusher out of Clemson. Ayapani Laulu out of Oregon is a guy that I'm higher on the most. A center for them. I think he's just absolutely a mauler and a guy that can really get off the ball pretty well as a center. I think he's a guy that's undervalued because of his position, but could end up moving up boards later on. And then Damon Wilson rounds out the edge rushers. And just to kind of talk about the edge rushers as a group at the end here, plenty of guys, I think day 2, day 3 guys. There's obviously the guys at the top, but I like the depth of this class, right? So you might have those Colin Simmons, Dylan Stewart, but I think all these guys have a chance to really take a step forward this year in terms of draft stock. Will Helt had a really good year last year, and that was on a line full of future NFL draft picks. Kenyatta Jackson, was a rotational player, now steps into a larger role last year and even this year. A guy that I think could have a big year. Yanze Pierre, different body type than some of these guys, might be a little bit different. Damon Wilson, Missouri last year, 9 sacks, and a guy that at Miami going to have more spotlight, going to have more players around him. He could see more one-on-ones next year because of all the interior pressure that Miami can get. So excited to see that here. So this is the top 50 before the season. Again, if you want more detailed explanations about these players, strengths and weaknesses, go to the summer scouting watch list. Go for the NFL draft prospect watch list I did this summer. You can find those on thegamehouse.com. Those will go through not a full scouting report, but more of notes on these guys and how they do. This is, again, more of a watch list and kind of see how these guys are going to fit. This is how I'd rank them right now. That'll change as soon as football starts in a couple of weeks. We're all excited for that. So if you like this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll have more stuff coming out next week. We'll have our first NFL mock draft of the football season. We did one back after the 2026 NFL draft. So we'll have the new NFL mock draft. We'll have NFL draft prospects to watch for week 0 and a lot more coming to this channel, as well as thegamehouse.com. So make sure to like and subscribe here if you want to see that. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.